You look like you were standing around with
Global permanent paper shortage.
Yeah, that's a thing. So it's 10 o'clock, and I think everybody that's going to show up here is here, and there's 3 or 4 people on Zoom.
6.
6, okay, I can only see 2 on there, so. So let's get started. I put a space on the agenda for announcements and introductions. Is there anybody here that hasn't been here before? Stand up and declare yourself. I thought Juniper from Winchester said she was going to be here too, but I don't see her, so, but that's okay. The next thing I had on here was the next upgrade will be Koha 17.11. That was the version that was released in 2017 in November. That's why it's 17-11. It's been out now for several months, and the bugs seem to be working out of it fairly well, and Bywater wants to start looking at upgrading customers probably May. And we would do the same thing that we've been. I'll plan some training sessions. I've been following the developments with 17.11, and it's like the last upgrade. There really aren't that many significant changes. So, it's not going to be a major whole ton of changes all at once like there was last spring. Some of the features that are interesting, in the OPAC, there'll be like a dashboard for users. So on every screen, you'll be able to see, every screen in the OPAC, there'll be a space there that has like how many things you have checked out. It'll just have information about your account. Once you're logged in, there'll be some information about your account on every screen. And the other one is holds history for patrons. Patrons will be able to see what's been happening with the holds on their account, instead of it just being a mystery, like, you know, I put this thing on hold, it came, and now I don't know what happened after that. There'll be like the ability to see what happened to a hold, if it was canceled by staff, if it was canceled by them. So the next thing I've got on here is the policies that were added. I've updated the policy manual that we've been building, and if you go to NExpress and search for NExpress policy manual, there it is right there. Well, it wants me to open it with something I'm not familiar with, so this is a new laptop. I probably don't have Adobe installed. But that's where it is. All you got to do is search for an NExpress policy manual, click on the link. The privacy statement is also there, and the participation agreement for 2018 is also there. Find those things without having to go search someplace else. You can just search for them in Koha. I wish I could open this. I don't know if those got sent out. Last year they were sent out. There was a paper copy sent out with the bill in January, I believe. And I thought that's what we were going to do this year, but Carolyn isn't here to do all those things automatically anymore, so I'm not sure 100% what happened there.
Yeah, I don't. Well, we're waiting for stats to come in first. Yes, that's at the volume. And then baseline 7,000. So once stats are in, then Caroline will be sending those out. The thing is, it differs for many of you. So I'm not sure that we can really put it up online. We can't really send out 3-day participation agreement, a 5-day.
Oh, this is the NExpress participation agreement, not the courier.
Yeah. Well, that break by budget. So it has to say there would be one letter for this, and you wouldn't know which one you were.
Yeah, it usually comes out at the same time we get our service level.
It'll come out after February 15th.
Okay.
Okay, so there'll be a paper copy that'll come out with your annual NExpress bill. But if anybody wants to download it and look at it early, it's right there. Yeah. It probably, since your board has to sign off on it, it might not hurt to print it out as soon as you can, so that they might actually have time to read it before the meeting. They'll have time, they won't do it, but Dan was going to talk about Zephyr marketing, so that's the next thing on the agenda. I thought that's why you said
No,
that.
I was trying to get my seat up. Well, since I'm standing, I won't sit down. We've been working with a marketing company out of Kansas City, digital marketing, branding, called Zephyr Digital Design, to update NExpress as a brand. We have pretty much wrapped up, I guess you could say, phase 2 of this project, and that leaves one final phase left of the project. So what that means is the next thing from Zephyr directly to our constituents, you guys, about what they developed for the catalog. So I don't have a whole lot of information about it. We've seen it. We got the proposal, and I'm pretty excited about it. One thing I was going to mention is at the last meeting, I mentioned the list function of the catalog, and that's going to play, I think, really a lot into the changes, the updates that we make for a more visual catalog, at least the front page of it, because the lists are what feed into things like carousels, so that we can see covers, book covers. Also, if they're a big part of featured content, we talked about at the last meeting, some ways that we can promote maybe materials that don't get used a lot, besides just the bestsellers, but also things like around Valentine's Day, things, a virtual display that you would have. But that also feeds off. So, as I mentioned at the last meeting, if you have people who already come up with featured content or these comments, we'd love for you to start using the list feature if you're not already. If you're doing it like in a spreadsheet right now, start doing it hopefully in Cohawk. Library, I know not all of you are, but maybe think about who would be good at your library to kind of help create these lists, because we're going to need to draw off this going into the future. So I would just ask you to maybe, that's one thing you could really do, is let's get this kind of featured content bubble developed. But yeah, we're going to leave it up to Zephyr, I think, to kind of make the first steps and to introduce you to what they came up with. So, any questions about that ephemeral description of where we're at?
Well, I think one of the things that Mike said is that he is going to try to send out an email about some of the things that they're working on.
Right.
So,
That's what, yeah, I mean, I think they're going to use like a MailChimp blast to at least our NExpress libraries, whether that's directors or just everybody who's on an NExpress users list right now. As always, we've asked, I think from the very beginning, back when we started this in July, is if you have any feedback about anything, there is an email address. It's neckles@zephyrdigital.com, I believe, that you're always been asked to share any of your feelings, articles, but I would say that this kind of discovery part is really kind of winded down. We're really really moving forward. Great.
This is one of the plugins that's available that could be something we could have on the OPAC. That the way that this plugin works is you have a list in Koha. I can get over back to, there we go. And I know Leavenworth has been building some lists. Here's a list for the New York Times nonfiction bestsellers. So it's one of the lists that you can create in Koha. You can see through the OPAC or through the staff client, and it's just plugged in all of the books that were on all of the titles that were on the New York Times bestseller list that we published this upcoming Sunday. But what we can do is, if we have a list like this, we can take it and then through that plugin display it on the homepage in Koha, not as a list of titles, but as like a revolving group of covers. So, but that's something that, one of the things that Zephyr found when they talked to actual library users is that kind of visual display in the catalog is something that they thought we lacked. So the next thing that I have on here are item level requests, because in the last couple of months, I've had a whole bunch of people contact me and say that, all of these things on my hold list, there's a whole bunch of requests that are being placed at the item level instead of at the title level. And there are a couple of issues with item level holds, because if you place an item level hold like on a pre-ordered item on something that isn't actually in the catalog yet, the hold system links that request to a specific barcode number. And if there's no barcode number, then even when a barcode number gets added to that item, the request can never be filled. And this has happened a couple of times where people have contacted me and they've said, I have a patron who's been on hold for this for a couple of months. They were like number 2 on the list, but they've never gotten the item. And I look at it, and it's because the request was at an item level, and I actually say no barcode in the item level part of the request. So I talked to Diana because she had one morning, there were 4 requests placed on items at her library that were all item level requests. And she was wondering why that happened. And it was because staff at 4 different libraries had placed item level requests. The only time you really need to do an item level request is if you have a need for that specific item. And I can't imagine one library having a need for a specific item at another library. And so what occurred to me is I could add code so that it would be, if this became a really serious problem, I could write code that would make it so that it was impossible for you to place an item level request on a specific item owned at another library. You have a question, Helen?
There's a scenario that, not often, but let's say you get a DVD and it's so beyond playable, so you can't see it. So you want to return it, and you want one that's, you don't want the hold to get put on that one. So then we'll just
that would be a legitimate reason to do it, yeah.
So that's
Mm-hmm. I can totally see that. These were on books, though.
right.
So that was the issue there. Is I think all of those requests that Diana sent me last week were, I think they were all books.
There was a point, I know, when we would have it, let's say a person came to the desk and we went to check out to them, and it came up that there was a hold. Well, in that situation, because they had the item that they were checking out, we would go ahead and check it out to them and mark ignore. And there was a point when you put that ignore, that it would put it automatically to an item level hold. Is that still happening?
That still happens from time to time. It's not as bad as it was, and that's due to a bug in Koha. This specific incident, we now have the ability, holds are being logged, requests are being logged every time somebody creates a request or modifies a request. And in all of the situations except one or two that I've seen in the last 2 months, they've been placed at the item level by staff. So for right now, that's just, I wanted to give everybody a reminder that, you know, there isn't really a good reason to do that. Unless you have a really good reason to request a specific item from somewhere else, like Helen's example, there really isn't a good reason to do that. And that was the thing about most of these item level requests I've seen in the last 2 months, is that there really doesn't seem to have been a good reason. And so I wanted to just give everybody a reminder. And then, you know, over the weekend, it occurred to me that that would be a possibility. I could make it so that you couldn't do it. But I wouldn't want to have to go that far, because there are some legitimate reasons to do that. So does anybody have any other questions about that? Yes. Patrons have no ability to place an item level request. It has to be staff if it's happening. Yeah. Yeah, and that seems, and in that case, you're only, and then it's your stuff, yeah. So.
I know Heather used to go through and delete item level when she saw that there wasn't. I only know this because she felt it one time. But I know she used to do that, and then that's when I learned item level rules are not cool.
Well, and
I wonder if we just need to have that conversation with all of our staff one more time. Item level rules are not okay. Don't do them unless it's necessary.
that wouldn't be a bad conversation to have. In some cases, if you place an item level request, and I've actually seen this happen, like you've got a new book that comes out and there's 5 copies and you place an item level request on one, and then the patron that has it before you checks it out and then never returns it. So you're never going to get a copy of that request. If the patron keeps it overdue, if it gets damaged and has to be withdrawn, then you have to delete that request before you can delete the item. So in a lot of cases, it just doesn't make sense at all, because there's tying the request to the item means that if anything happens to that item, it's gonna mess up the request. So the next thing I had on here, and report number 2731 is a good example of this. I have been trying every week to delete 10 reports. So right now we are down to 1,107 reports. So at this rate, I'll be done about 30 years after I die. So what I've been trying to do with some of these reports, there are a whole bunch of them that I found that are related to weeding, that the big report that I wrote, report number 2731, replaces item type superweeder. Everything that item type superweeder, everything that this report does can be done in report number 2731. I've got like 19 of them here, or 18 of them here that are all ready to be deleted. And so I've put these notes on them that are easy to see. There's one here that the note on it is the results from this report, number 1426. When I looked at this, the results aren't even accurate. The report's badly written. Something's probably changed in the database. And so the report doesn't actually do what it says it's going to do. And so I'm trying, when I find a whole slew of reports that can be replaced with something else, to put notes on them. And I've got all these have a note on them that says I'm scheduled these to be deleted on March 1st. So if anybody sees something here that they use all the time that's got this note on it, and they have an argument for why I shouldn't delete it, just let me know, and I can explain to you either how to use report 2731 to replace the report that's going to be deleted, or I can, you know, if you have a really compelling argument, I just won't delete it. But that gives everybody like a month from now to let me know if there's something on here that you really can't live without.
2731 show item type, collection code, location.
Let me find the run button. It does everything. It's the kitchen sink. You can sort it by library. You can sort it by shelving location. You can do it by item type, collection code. You can do a left anchored call number search. You can limit based on the date the item was added. You can show things added before a date that you specify. You can show you can show items where the date last seen was before a date you specify. You can do date last borrowed was before a date you specify. You can say I only want to see things that have checked out 0 times. You can say I only want to see things that have checked out less than 5 times. You can say I only want to see things that have checked out less than 100 times. You can show things that are checked out or not checked out. You can show things that have a status issue like lost, damaged, or not. I tried to make it so that you can do everything. And it fills in, it has to have a % symbol here in order to run. So I wrote some code that makes it so that it has a % symbol there. But if you just want to see all the books that have a J, the first letter, and the call number, you can do that. If you want to do JUV as the first 3 letters, do that. I tried to make it as flexible as possible so that you do everything that each of those says. And if you don't need to limit by shelving location, you can just leave it alone, and it'll do all of it. But then so you could get really specific. You could say show me Pacer items with a children's location and a launchpad tablet item type. You can really drill down, or you can leave it as broad as you want to be. But the reason that I've been expanding this report and making it so that it does all these different things is that instead of having 18 reports, when each report does something different, this one report can do 18 different things. So, and I'm trying to do that with other reports too when I write them, is make them as flexible as possible. And whenever anybody calls and says, I need a report that does that, for the last 6 months, I've almost always been able to just say, oh, I think you need report number 2731. That's answers like half of the questions I have about reports.
Will this report tell you how many times the item has been checked out in its entire history, or just from when you wipe the slate clean every year?
The total number of checkouts is recorded in the 952 in the MARC record, so it's permanently part of the item record. It never goes away. Things like there isn't anything on the item record that goes away. The connection between an item and who had it last, that does go away. Circulation history, as far as which patron had which item, that goes away, but after 2 years. But the total number of circs, the total number of renewals, the last borrowed, last seen, last date added, all of those things are permanent as part of the items record. So I don't think there's anything we could. Let me do, what's a library that's small? We'll do burn. Adult items that burn, there's nothing that comes up on this report that I can think of that isn't something that's part of the permanent item record. Title, biblio item, barcode, home branch, location, collection code, call number, author, title, publication year, date added, date last borrowed, date last seen, number of issues, number of renewals, the total of those 2 columns. Is it checked out? Does it have a status problem? And if there are any notes, it's got the public notes and the non-public notes. And you can even click on the link at the end here and go over and in a new window edit the items. So I tried to make it really flexible and really useful. And if you just want to go to the biblio, you can go to the whole biblio record. From one end you get the biblio, and the other end you get the specific items. So now you know if you're going to call me about a report, I'm just going to say 2731. So that's the first one that I've been working on, trying to find all the things that can be replaced by that. But there have been other times that I've opened up the reports and just looked in the column to see when they were last run. And the data is blank, which means it's been over 2 years since it was last run. And if I run it and it doesn't work, I don't even put a note on it. I just delete it. So, and the reports that are deleted are logs. So if somebody comes back in 6 months and say, hey, I really need that report that doesn't work, I could always recreate it. There's a better chance, though, that I'll just say, oh, you can do that with report 2731. So nobody sent me any additions to the agenda other than Maggie, and we can talk about that later. So did anybody else have anything that they wanted to add to this? Yeah.
I just had an idea that I thought might be helpful to the catalogers. I know the cataloger at our library, she gets a little flustered sometimes if she comes across an error in an existing record, or she doesn't understand why something was put in a certain way. So I don't know if maybe it would be a good idea if there was like a email list.
The cataloger's email list?
Cataloger's emails list, just so if a cataloger had a question, they could pose it to the whole group and get an answer. Maybe that communication might help with some of the inconsistencies.
That's not a bad idea. I think Dan's nodding his head over there.
If I had Jesse just email the directors list and ask them to pass on, or should maybe just public library, which would be best for you all? Is the directors list a good way to get information out to the library?
The director can give you the cataloger's name and email.
Yeah, so I'll have Jesse then email directors and then to ask for that information, and then she'll build a list off of what she gets back.
Okay, that sounds great.
Okay.
Okay, normally the next thing on here is one that actually kind of made me damned irritable when I saw it. Normally when there is a new enhancement to Koha, it comes out in a new version. Somebody decided that this was such a, they called it a trivial enhancement, and so they backported it, and it's going to be in our system on the 15th of February. And if I hadn't caught on that it was going to happen, it would just show up, and then I would get all kinds of questions about where did this come from, because it's not in the release. It's not going to be in the release notes for a patch upgrade. We have, the big upgrades come, a couple of times a year. Every month, Bywater has got us so that every month I think it's the second Wednesday of each month, they are doing a patch upgrade, just not an upgrade, just a bug fix upgrade. And so in our upgrade that'll be on February 14th, this is a feature that I think everybody wants. You'll be able to do a partial write-off amount. So if you go to the NExpress homepage, the link to the agenda for this meeting is right there, and you can find this document to share with your staff. But these are the instructions for how to do the partial write-off, and I'll just walk through that here. Let me go over. We don't have it in our system, so I'm going to get it from one of the test systems, and this is still set up for me, so that's good. Staff number 6. I don't think this is a bad feature to have added. I was just surprised that it's being added in the middle of the release instead of a major release. and that it was going to be like a stealthy release of a new feature. Yeah, this is the patron. You can see I've been playing around with them because they have $225 in fines. So I created some fines on here, and if you do write off all, this writes off everything on the patron's account. There's no, you can't do a partial write-off with write-off all, but they've got a $25, $50, $75, and $100 fine on here, and you can see this $100 fine has already been reduced by 75. Let me go to this $50 fine. You know, if you want to leave a note, NExpress will automatically plug in your username and your location into that note field, but if you want to type in anything else, so I'm putting a note there, and I'm going to click on the write-off for this one line. And there is now a way that you can set the amount that you want to write off. This will be starting February 15th. So if we just want to forgive half of that, we can click on write off, put $25 in there and write off. And then the amount was originally 50 and now it's down to 25. And if you click on the account tab, you'll see there was a write-off here of $25. If this is owed on an item, it'll have the item information in there. This is just, these are ones that I added, so it's not a tied to a specific item, but that's what a partial write-off will look like. The other thing that I'm not happy about is, and this is in the notes that I've got there, if we go to a $25 write-off, any write-off, if you click on write-off and the amount of the line you're trying to write off is $25, and you put in, oh, let's just say $5,000, and you click write-off, you end up with a $4,800 credit on the account. So I'm not really thrilled about this, and I've already submitted a bug report, and Kyle at Bywater has already written a patch. I figured this out yesterday, and somebody has already come up with a way of prohibiting it from happening. But that's not going to be in the version that we get on February 15th. That'll be, with our luck, it won't be until like 1811. So I'm going to try as soon as I can, but hopefully before we get this, there might be some code that I can write that will disallow amounts more than the amount due on an individual line. But this is something I know that people have wanted for a while, so I don't think it's a bad feature. I'm just not really thrilled with the fact that, number one, it really has a big bug in it, and number two, it isn't coming out, you know, with as part of a major release package. So
The folks on Peanut Gallery are awfully excited about it.
they're happy.
Couple of goods, and this is great.
Okay. Well, I mean, what do you guys think?
Pretty much, instead of currently for a lot of our lost items, if it's our thing, we'll change it to the actual price we can replace it to. I mean, we have like $25 in there. If we put for $11, we'll lower it to $11.
Yeah. Now you could just write.
Having to edit the item, we can just write off for it.
Exactly. Yeah.
You can't edit the price once it goes into this bin.
Exactly.
It's real annoying.
Yeah. Now you can. You have a way of reducing the. Yeah. So if you go to the homepage in Koha, in the left-hand column where it says news, there's a link there that says detailed meeting agenda with documentation. And if you click on that, that's the agenda for today's meeting. And down here under partial write-offs coming February 15th, there's a link there to the instructions. The next big issue here has been something that has been a problem. This is another area where, let's see, I do have a set of instructions. There are a long set of instructions for account lockout. So with the last upgrade, there was that neat new feature where you could, if the patron is on the OPAC and they try to log into their account more than 5 times, it locks them out. And it was not clear in the documentation that the same thing happens to staff. If you try to log into NExpress more than 5 times in a row with the incorrect password, you get this, you must reset your password link because it locks your account. And I did let everybody know that in an email and said that all you have to do is click on this link and you follow the same steps as the patron. You put in your username and your email address that's on your account, and then it will email you a link to reset your password so you can get in. Or you can call us, and I can do that, Robin can do that, Dan can do that. We can get you a new password. That's easy. Of course, what I also didn't realize is that when Heather and Liz created all of these accounts for everybody, they didn't put anybody's email address into those accounts. That's been taken care of. Your tech and circ accounts have the address that goes with your library in the library system settings in Koha, which you can find. Actually, the best way for you guys to find that, because you can't do that. No, it's not here. It's under circ. It's under circ. So the email address for your library in this contact information column, that's the email address that is set up for your circ account and your tech account. And if anybody needs those changed to something different, you can let me know and I'm happy to change those. And actually, you can change those yourself. That's something that you can change in your own accounts. If you want the circ account to have a different email address than the tech account, you guys can change those yourself. Yeah, but I didn't use those. I didn't use those. I did use, yeah, for the circ and the tech accounts, I've got circulation at Atchison for library for you guys. For the director account, there is Jackie's email address because I use the information over here that says director for the director accounts, and I use the information over here for the library for the circ and the tech accounts. And so those are all set up, but if you guys need to change those, you can do that yourself. I fixed yours, Cheryl, because I knew it was wrong. I can hear you whispering over there. Yes, I fixed yours. And I need to fix yours in this table is based on the information that's in Koha for in your library's contact record. And so if you go to circulation and look through this list and find your library and see something that's wrong there, if you let us know, I can go into Koha and change that and rebuild this table and fix it because I know that there are mistakes. And every time I've sent out an email saying, could you guys look at that and let me know if something's wrong? Nobody's responded until like a month later when somebody says, oh my God, this is wrong. How do I change it? So if you see something wrong there, just let me know and I can fix this table here. So those are all set up though now so that if you do have if you do get this message and you follow follow the password change link, that should work now because you actually have an email address on all of those accounts. The trick there also is you have to know what that email address is when you're locked out. But like I said too, you can always call and ask. The other thing that was not made clear in the Koha documentation is that the password lockout also affects SIP connections. So if you have PC reservation or libkey or a self-check machine and the patron has to enter their username and their password to access those services, if they enter the incorrect password, that's going to cause the same kind of thing. So actually there's a report that I wrote And I put the number of the report in here somewhere, report number 3019. I can actually show you exactly what happens here. If we can get report 3019 to come up here. So if you're wondering which patrons at your library have entered incorrect passwords, we'll just do Atchison at the top of the list. You know, here are 16 patrons at Atchison. We've got this one, this card number here. They have attempted to log in their account 5 times. Last time was on the 23rd of January at 21:52. So what is that? 10 till, yeah, till 10 in the evening. And they're locked out of their account. And there are some other people here that are, you know, they've had 1 bad attempt, 4 bad attempts, 3 bad attempts, whatever. I'm actually going to load up the SIP testing tool. And we'll look at, go ahead.
They had 1 attempt, 5 attempts, so that's a running number, a total amount of times that they've attempted, and it's been incorrect. It's not just that day.
Yes, and there's a bug report on that already. I know. Yeah. Yeah, and I've already done a bug report that says, you know, this should be reset every evening. At the very least every evening. Every hour would be even better. So I've got, this is the patron here. So I'm going to connect to a SIP server using Atchison's information. And I'm going to send a good SIP request. This is what it looks, this is how SIP, I'm not sharing the screen. Let's stop share and reshare. So that's what a good SIP connection looks like. If I change the password and do a test, you'll actually see it'll say invalid password. And so if I go back to that report, which means I'm going to lose those people again, this test card is now on here with 1. But if I fix the password and go back, we've got that card number right there that says test. After a successful login attempt, it resets. So once the patron is logged in successfully, if they can do it before they get to number 5, the number resets. So that the fact that this is happening over SIP, I didn't realize that. Trainings, when we added this feature last spring or last fall, because it wasn't in the documentation. I am now part of the Koha documentation team. Although that being said, you know, nobody came to the last Koha documentation team meeting except for me, which was really, it was like at 10 o'clock at night.
The Koha documentation team, though.
No, I'm not the chair. It's one of those things where some of the people that are on the documentation team are in the United States. Some of them are in Europe. Some of them are in Australia and New Zealand. And so the idea was floated, why don't we stagger these meeting times so that Bob and Irma don't have to get up at 6 in the morning to go to the meeting. And the guy in India, I can't remember his name, he gets up in the middle of the night to go to these meetings. And so the idea was floated, why don't we stagger the meeting times so that, you know, every meeting will roll 6 hours forward. And of course, the first meeting that was it was like at 11 o'clock at night, I was the only one there. And the next one will be at like 5 o'clock in the morning or something. And who knows who'll be able to be there. But I think staggering the meeting times might have actually created more problems than it solved. But that is an issue, is that, this feature was not really documented well. And so that's something to take into consideration, is if a patron gets locked out, it could be because they had a PC reservation problem. And then, of course, the fact that PC reservation has this long-standing bug can exacerbate things, because sometimes when you sit down to PC reservation, the first time you try to log in, it doesn't work right. John had questions about this from Leavenworth yesterday. That's been a problem ever since like PC reservation version 3. And I think they're on 4 now. So.
Is there anything on staff side of Koha that indicates when you pull up that patron's account that they're logged out?
I believe there is. Let's actually go back to that report. So this person should be locked out. Scott. Check out. Maybe they're not locked out. I know there's Summit. I think there is. I'm almost certain there is. Yes, after they've logged in successfully, if they log in, I thought there was something here. I know that I've seen it too. Patron's card is expired, restrictions. The account's expired as well.
Oh, scroll down.
The red letters?
Yeah.
I added those.
Oh, okay. So this is,
This is another thing. Well, I'm maybe it's under change password. I know that it was somewhere in here, and I'm just not sure where it is now. Patron's account is expired, so they're locked out, but they're locked out on their expired card. Let me do some research on that.
That's usually the source of most of our calls when patrons can't get into, their
Yeah.
books or whatever, they find that they're expired.
The flush shuts you down immediately.
Yes. I will figure out. I know that I've seen that in here somewhere, and I just don't know where it is. Off the top of my head. That was the other issue that's come up, though. And this was another thing that was not documented well, is once a patron is locked out, they can go through the whole change your forgot your password process. But and staff can unlock their account too, but you have to use the change password button. If you just click edit and scroll down here and write a new password in here, that won't remove the lockout. You actually have to click on the button up here that says change password and do the new password here in order to remove the lockout. And that was also something that was not well documented. And the instructions here, I walked through all of this step by step. So, and I even put, that's the wrong place to do it. And I've added that text in there above there. So hopefully that won't be a problem anymore. The next thing that's in here, this is the question that I get all the time. I've been getting it as long as I've been using Koha, is somebody will call up and say, we can't change a patron's password. We're trying to change somebody's password and it won't let us change their password. And usually what it turns out to be is that it's a staff member and staff can't change their own passwords. And the reason that is because there is a very long-standing bug in Koha. In order for you guys, let's see, let me go to, here we've got, this is the account for Atchison Circ. If, here we go. The same security preference that gives you the ability to change a staff member's password also gives you the ability to change their security settings. So if I gave, let's say Mike has got a disgruntled employee who logs in all the time as Linwood Circ, and who knows, maybe they're a meth addict, maybe it's my brother. Maybe it's some, you know, really horrible person that shouldn't be working in the library, but somehow or another they've wrangled a job at the library, which shows bad taste on your part, Mike. So you've got a disgruntled employee, and if they have the ability to change their own password, they also have their ability to make themselves a system administrator and go in and wreak all kinds of havoc in the system. That's why staff members can't change their own passwords, is because these two system preferences have been, these two security settings are linked to each other. And I don't know why nobody has ever untangled those two things, but that's why you can't change your own password. So that's why if Atchison Circ locks itself out, Atchison Tech can't log in and fix the problem for them, because Atchison Tech can't change staff members' passwords. There are all kinds of, and the reason, and that also affects let's say all the staff members. I think this was an issue at Leavenworth where, like, Matt had his personal card, has the patron category library associate. And the reason that library associates can't change their own passwords is because the library associate patron category is part of a broader patron category called, I think just called system or staff. Yes, and that works for library associate, but if you do that with staff, there's the potential that you can eliminate those security settings.
Okay, can I take a time out for I have no idea what we're talking about. Okay, so you're talking about like when you're already in Koha,
yeah,
and you want to change your password versus logging into Koha with that password.
So let's say, okay. Let's say you're somebody that normally logs into Troy as
like first thing in the morning, the computer boots up, you open up Koha to log in. That's what we're talking about?
yes.
Okay.
And so let's say you have a staff member that's using the account for Troy Circ to log in, and they lock themselves out of Troy Circ. You couldn't go in as Donovan Director and reset their password for them, because you can't reset a staff member's password.
Okay.
That's because of a long-standing bug in Koha. You can.
If they hit the reset button, it will send an email
Yes.
to our main
Yes.
library email, which that staff member doesn't have access to. That's
Yeah.
okay, just checking.
Yeah, that's what'll happen. And if you want me to change that to an email address that your staff members do have access to, I can. The best thing, if you do.
I want to do a demonstration because I just locked myself out. I really did. I was trying to get into
Sabtech.
It was not taking my.
So is it Sabetha Tech or? Okay. Let me go find the report.
unfortunately, everybody's writing on the customer. It can't be limited at 5 because there are days and other customers. Because can't remember. Well, typing, you can't see it, it's so long, you don't know how many typos you make.
Is there any way that you can set it so that you, when we're typing in the password, other than just one letter at a time?
No.
I would, if I would type it into Notepad, which is really easy to open, copy and paste it in there, then you won't lock yourself out.
I mean, that's what you just have to do on websites all the time if you don't have a password manager, because every site.
So yes.
And if you have people having problems, type it in somewhere you can see it, highlight it, copy it, and then paste it.
So Sabetha Tech is locked out. So if you wanted to,
Control C, Control V.
so Sabetha Tech, I'm trying to log in. If you, I'm gonna have to do this from a different browser, I think. So if I go to the staff client and I try to log in with Sabetha Tech and the incorrect password, I get this this little box right up here says you must reset your password. And if you click on that, you end up going to the OPAC and you have to type in your username and your email address, which the email address that goes with this account is Kim Priest. That's sabethalibrary.org. And then as soon as I hit submit, within 15 minutes, Kim Priest at sabethalibrary.org is going to get an email saying to reset your password, click this link. You'll come to a different page in the OPAC and you'll be able to type in a new password. That way you will be able to reset your password. And you can set it to whatever you want. So when you get back to Sabetha today, well, I haven't heard the phone ring.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully they were logged in.
There you go. If they're logged in before you got here, they should be good.
So that would block both computers, right?
It'll block anybody that's not logged into that account. Yeah, it'll lock that account down. So the side effect of this is that if you want to change your password and you don't want to have to call us and change it for you, you can go to the you can go to the OPAC, you can click on log into your account, and you can click on this forgot your password link, and you can set your own password. You can put your username there and your email address there, and it will send you this email, and it will allow, this is the one way now that staff can set their own passwords without having to go through us.
So change your password button that they added.
Yeah.
It won't work.
The change your password button won't work because you can't change your own password from in the staff client, but this process will work from the OPAC.
Could we add like a statement on there to reset your password after your login or your email? And then also, if this doesn't work for you, please call your library.
I can add that, sure.
That seems like a reasonable thing, right?
She didn't want to go that way.
Because I know some people would do this thing and then
They'll figure it out.
I totally agree with you, and I can add that text to this message because I already changed this text here. So it says you should receive a password reset email within 15 minutes. So this is another area where it's not a bad feature, but the documentation before it was added, led me to believe that there were things about it that 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 weren't true. So I apologize for any problems you guys are having with that. When I did the testing on the test server for all of the things that were documented, it worked perfectly. It was the undocumented parts of it that seemed to have messed everything up. And I think that might be the instruction sheet that is on that agenda covers all of the things that we've talked about. It covers everything that at this point that I know is wrong with this. I went through and tried to review all of the documents that I put on this agenda for today. I tried to review them all yesterday. I even, there's one that just gave me a huge headache because everything about it has changed since I wrote the documentation for it. So, because it doesn't work anymore. Sure.
It really applies to everyone. She got locked out, and if we went up to change the password, would it be instantaneous? The password would be instantaneous, or does she have to wait? If we did.
If you change it, it's instant.
Okay.
Yeah.
The second would be, I could see her asking for the exact same password.
And that's not a problem.
That's not a problem.
No.
Okay.
It just means that she's going to spell it wrong again in the future, probably. If I want the same password that I've already forgotten 50 times. Yeah. Yeah. So the next thing that's on here, Dunkirk currently is not a bad example of this. There have been a whole bunch of issues, and Maggie's contacted me a lot. Lori from Baser contacts me all the time about duplicate records. Not Laura from Baser and Lori from Ottawa contacting me fairly regularly about duplicate records, particularly DVDs, because there are all kinds of DVDs where there's more than one bibliographic record for one title. Part of the discussion, I think it might have been with Maggie recently, is that there are a whole bunch of things that say video recording that are, it's hard to tell sometimes if when it says video recording, if it's a VHS, which there are still about 5,000 of those in the system, or was it less? There are not a lot of VHS, but what there are of course older records, and it's sometimes hard to distinguish them from things that aren't VHS because the 245H just says video recording instead of saying video recording DVD, video recording VHS, video recording whatever. And that's because the standard in AARC2 cataloging rules is it doesn't matter what kind of video recording it is. It should just be brackets video recording. And there should be, and the expectation was that somewhere else in the record it will say what kind of video recording. The 245H is called the GMD, the General Materials Designation. And the AARC rules list about 20 different things that are supposed to go in that category. But I don't think I've ever found a record anywhere on the internet in anybody's catalog that has any of those 20 recommended things in it. You see things all the time that will say large print or text large print, or I've seen things that say paperbacks. Video games, there's sometimes, for DVDs alone, sometimes it will just say DVD, sometimes it will say DVD video recording, sometimes it will say video recording DVD, sometimes it will say video recording parentheses DVD. They're all over the place at all different libraries, and it seems to be getting worse now because the move that a lot of libraries are making to RDA, they don't even have the 245H. There's nothing there. Where it says video record, where it's it says DVD or Blu-ray or VHS is supposed to eventually be in like the 346A, which we don't even have the catalog set up to allow us to put the 346A into the MARC record.
So what was 346?
In the, so let's look at Dunkirk widescreen DVD. Edit record. In the 300s, there is a field that we don't even have in our MARC framework, 346A. Well, and this one has 340 as medium DVD video. And I don't know if that's part of the RDA standard or not. In other words, I guess the bottom line, what I'm really trying to say here is that we have a lot of video recordings that it's virtually impossible for patrons to tell what kind of video recording it is that they're getting based on what they see in the catalog. If we do a search for, I'm trying to remember the name of the Harry Styles is in this movie. So if we do a search for this in the patron catalog, here you can see it says, video recording after the title. That's the 245H. The second one down says video recording DVD and Blu-ray DVD combo. The next one is video recording Blu-ray. And then there's another one on here that's there's another one in the system. Oh, it's because it doesn't have Harry Styles in it. It's why it's not on this list. There's another one that's called Dunkirk that's not even the same movie.
George, can you show this 45H?
Yes.
MARC record?
So here's the title, statement of responsibility, and then that's the 245H. That's where that data goes. And sometimes if you pull in a MARC record from someplace else, that's blank. If it's a DVD, it will be blank.
Is there a possibility that you could come up with a form that if we do have a DVD or Blu-ray that doesn't have a MARC record, that we could get it correct? Like you could give us a sample of where or what to put in each one, because those of us that
guess what?
others, just.
If you go to the agenda for this and click on number 4, there's a link there to a PDF document that goes through everything I'm talking about here. So I've pretty much said all of the things that are in here. I probably said it better on paper because I had a day to write that, whereas right now I'm just talking extemporaneously after already talking for an hour and 10 minutes.
But I'm just saying, is there a form that you can just give an example?
Yes. There's steps to cataloging these at the bottom of this document. Step by step.
That was on the agenda.
Yes. If you go to the home page and click on that detailed meeting agenda with documentation, it's the file under item number 4 on the agenda. So I think it was Maggie that told me that they had a patron that had requested some videos that came and then the patron ended up with a couple of VHS tapes. So what I did a couple of weeks ago is I ran a report and found all of the things that were VHS, and I used MARC Edit to batch update the 245H on all of the things that I could confirm were VHS tapes, so that 245H field says video recording parentheses VHS, so that it's perfectly clear to patrons, because you know, what they see here when they look at something that says VHS is going to be video recording VHS. It's going to be right there in the catalog. And there are probably some that got missed. But, you know, it was a large number of things. And it was that situation that I just talked about where some of them said VHS, some of them said VHS tape, some of them said VHS video recording. They all said different things. I made them all exactly the same. Then I did the same as much as possible with things that are DVDs. I made the 245H all say video recording DVD. Then I did the same thing with Blu-rays. So I think that that should help patrons in a lot of respects. The problem, of course, is that there are some things, there are some items that are older that are still going to be a mess because there are some records where the bibliographic record will say video recording DVD, but then when you actually look, you can tell from the call numbers on the items that some of them are DVDs and some of them are Blu-rays. That's a much harder thing to untangle because it means contacting these libraries and saying, what is this thing really? Is this, you know, is this because we've got a Blu-ray that's on the wrong record, or is it because we've got a DVD on the wrong record? And, you know, a lot of these date back to when Blu-rays were new. So there's a bunch of them that I can't fix without seeing the items, but as much as possible, where it was perfectly clear from the bibliographic record and the items that I could see on the record that it was a DVD, they all say video recording DVD. And the same is true with Blu-ray, where it was perfectly clear it was a Blu-ray, they all say Blu-ray. The third issue has been this issue of the DVD Blu-ray combinations. And so these are the issues that I found when I was looking at this stuff. Is, you know, issue number one is that the 245H is wildly inconsistent throughout the system. The second issue is we have a whole bunch of things where there are multiple bibliographic records for the same title. Some of those seem justified. If it's got, you know, if it's a movie and there's Blade Runner is a great example of this. How many of you have ever seen the original movie Blade Runner? It's a lot of people. How many of you know how many different versions there are of the movie Blade Runner? There's 5. There was the original theatrical release. There was the second theatrical release. There was the final cut, and then the director's cut, and then like the special edition final director's cut. And they're all actually different movies. They're different lengths. All 5 of them have different content. And you can actually buy one set that has all 5 in one if you're a diehard Blade Runner fan and you've got nothing to do with your life but watch Blade Runner for 10 hours in a row and compare versions. So there are some cases where it seems perfectly justifiable to have different versions of the movie on separate bibliographic records, but then there's a lot of them. I think one of the ones Maggie sent me was Jaws, where there was, when DVDs were new, Jaws was released on DVD. And then there was a like 20th anniversary edition that's the exact same content as.
The special features are different.
No.
Yeah, because you didn't combine Jaws.
I didn't combine all 7 of them.
It was the same movie, that was the same length. The special features were slightly different, so you did not combine them.
There were 7 different Jawses, and I combined them down to 3 records, I think. Star Wars could be, yeah. Mike just suggested Star Wars is another one where there's 3 different versions at least. So that's an issue, and if you find those, let me know, and I'll try and do what I can to combine them. And actually, one of the sites that I've been using a lot is this site called Core Collectors. Like here we have Dunkirk. You know, this will show you all of the different versions that have been released with the UPC codes that go with them.
And you think each of those should have their own record on home office?
No, I don't think that each of these should have their own record. But some of these have 2 discs and some of them have 1. And some of them, Dunkirk, I don't see as much of a problem. It's usually the movies that are older where they've got. Casablanca was one that I looked at because somebody suggested to me that there was a problem with it. And there were like 5 different records for it, and I got it down to 2 because 4 of them were single disc editions that all had the same content. And one of them was a 2-disc edition that had a second disc with completely different content on it. I wouldn't recommend it because it's just a big time suck.
I have a similar question about books and whether we want them all to be on the same page. If you have a book, we got a copy of a Hemingway or whatever. There's 10 records for the same Hemingway book because they all have different pub dates because it's been continually published by a bunch of people since 1952.
Right.
So I normally just tag it to whichever one has the most items. But there is a potential use case where someone wants one specific edition over the other. Should we combine all those, I guess, is my question.
I've worked at a couple of libraries that have different schools of thoughts on this. Where I was in Idaho at Boise Public, every single ISBN had its own record. And because that was what the standards were for that group of libraries. At the Latah County Library District was part of Valnet, and if the content was the same, if they had the same number of pages, if the basic information, if the things between the covers was exactly the same number of pages and everything, then they could be combined. And then I've also seen at the Cooperative Information Network in Northern Idaho, every copy of every different version of Great Expectations is on one record, regardless of publisher, date, editor, different forwards, different afterwards, critical editions, they're all on one record. And so I think we need to be somewhere in the middle.
One of the things in cataloging class that they talked about was academics need the forward more than public libraries do. So their suggestion was academics may want a single item or a single record per item, however you want to do it.
They were definitely 100% different, but I think it's really confusing for paper.
It is.
There's 40 different versions.
Right, and that's why they said public libraries maybe should combine them.
The other issue we have within COHOG is that when patrons search from their side, they don't have the luxury of seeing how many items are available for each thing listed. They have to click in individually to every item. So like right now, I Googled or I searched and there's 4 different versions of Outlander. And the first version that comes up on the top of their screen only has 1 item, but the second one has 20 items. So if the patron had that information, they could pick the one with the most items. They don't have that luxury.
Well, that might be something actually, that in and of itself could be something that could be added. There are a couple of things that are coming up. Well, the first issue is an issue of discovery layer. There are some discovery layers that can be applied, like Bibliocommons is one where you do a search for Little Women and you see one entry for Little Women, and if you want to, and then when you click on that, you can see all of the different editions underneath it. And that's something that is more of a distant future thing for us than something that can happen immediately. But one of the issues there is that if we put everything on one record now, and then later we have this ability to have the different records separate, it's going to be hard to get that cat back in the bag. That's probably a really bad mixed metaphor, isn't it?
But it does get into like, are we putting paperback books separate from hardback copies of the same book?
They all have different pages.
They have different page counts, so by the general definitions, you would want them to be on separate records. Is that a practical use? Is that a way that our patrons are using our libraries? Would be my ultimate question.
Well, for that question, if you have someone who can't see very well, they don't want the little paperback.
Right.
You know, they might want to.
Right, so we wouldn't want to
would
put
want to
large
do that.
print in with regular
Right.
books.
Or
That
regular
seems like a
paperback.
good distinguishing
Right.
statement to make, but I mean, generally, how are most patrons using our library? Should that be the standard that we conform to?
Well, and I think the biggest issue with that statement is that when you say how most patrons are using our library, you've got there are 44 different libraries represented here. And how your patrons use your library in Troy is a lot different than how the patrons in Baser use the library there, and it's different than how the patrons use the library in Leavenworth.
I mean,
And so
I think
that's
we
why-
should have a large group discussion and come to a general consensus about it, because I think you're right. But I can see, like, as public libraries, we all generally have patrons in the same vein, or we wouldn't be in a consortium together. Am I wrong? You know, most people are reading for pleasure. If they want a delineation in the catalog, they could approach a university library. We have many that we could refer them to if they were looking for a specific edition. You know?
Well, where I wanted to take this part of the discussion, because I knew this was going to go there, is back to the idea of having a BIB standards committee. And that's something that I talked about last year, and I never had the time to do that, but I know that Laura was interested in that. Lori from Ottawa was interested in that. Laura from Baser was interested in that. There were several people that were interested in that. And so that's something that I need to get back to the front of. I need to make that a higher priority than I did last year. So, but I think that's something that we do need, is we need some, yeah.
Well, like the Dunkirk's, the one with one copy comes up above the one that has 23 copies. Is there any way to like weight the results by the number of copies that it has?
This is something that's a more immediate thing that is likely to happen, is that the search engine behind Koha is called Zebra. And by the end of the year, possibly by the time we upgrade in the spring, there will be a new search engine available called Elasticsearch. The way that Nick Clemens, 1711 could be as soon as the spring.
Oh, this one.
Yes.
And when you said the end of the year, and then you said spring, I thought you meant the year.
Sometime in 2018. How's that? Sometime in 2018, it's very likely that we will have the ability to switch from using Zebra to using Elasticsearch. And Elasticsearch can give us the ability to change the relevances. Right now, in Zebra, there's no way to say this is more relevant than that. There's no way to adjust those. But with Elasticsearch, it's likely that we will be able to do that, and that we will have more control over that. The way that Nick Clemens, who is one of the developers in Koha, has described Elasticsearch is Elasticsearch is like a tank, and Zebra is like a cup holder in the tank. There's a lot of things that we should be able to do with Elasticsearch. There's a lot of ways that searching and that using Elasticsearch to do the indexing can be adjusted and configured to make the results more relevant. So that's something that's probably more likely. But one thing that I think that we do have immediate control over is we ought to be able to, by adjusting some XML templates, make it so that patrons can see how many items there are on the OPAC. And I have a phone call with Bywater on Wednesday, so I will ask them about about getting in there and adjusting our XML templates to maybe see if we can put that information directly on the OPAC.
The other thing that sorry.
That's okay.
The other thing is, like, I think when, even on our side of the screen, that number of items is a little misleading, because like it says 20 items, 13 available. But when you click in, those 13 available
They're all on
available,
hold.
They're on hold for patrons.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
that could be adjusted so that it was the real number of copies listed as available.
And that's something that's been a long-standing issue that with Koha, and I don't know what the status is on that development, because I know there was somebody writing a development to do that.
And then there's no way to add like a sort by number of items feature to the, because you can sort it by a billion different things.
That would be a paid, something we could probably look at.
Yeah.
hiring somebody to do. It would be a feature that would have to be coded in and added, but.
And that's okay.
We're trying to get our patrons to do it themselves online and encourage them to be proactive, and then it's really hard and not in any way intuitive.
And I understand. So we were talking about merging things. What I came up with for dealing with one of the issues of merging items has been DVD and Blu-ray and the DVD Blu-ray combination packages. So what I came up with is a visual way of representing this is if you have a DVD and you have a Blu-ray, they should both be separate. If you have a DVD and a combo pack, and those are the only records for that title, they should both be on separate records. If you have a Blu-ray and a DVD Blu-ray combo, they should both be on separate records. But if you have a situation where there's all three, there's a DVD, there's the combination, and then there's the separate Blu-ray, I want to move towards combining, like with Dunkirk, have the DVDs and the DVD Blu-ray combinations be together. And the reason that I think that that makes sense is because if a patron has a DVD, all they have is a DVD player, and they request Dunkirk, and they put the request on the title, and they get the DVD, they can play the DVD. If they get the Blu-ray DVD combo, they can play the DVD from the DVD Blu-ray combo. But if they get just the Blu-ray, they can't do that. They could also, the other option would be to combine the Blu-ray and the DVD Blu-ray combo pack with the Blu-ray, but I don't think that that is as useful to our patrons because, where's the number? The number of holds on DVDs in 2017, the number of requests filled by DVDs was 23,319, and the number of requests on Blu-rays was 1,200. So I think that we're better serving our patrons who want DVDs if we can get the DVD Blu-ray combos onto the same record as the DVDs, because that way they get through the cycle faster. If we put the Blu-rays on the same record as, if we put the combos on the same record as the Blu-rays, then we're only satisfying the needs of us. We're satisfying the need of a smaller number of patrons. So
what you're saying is that if we get a DVD Blu-ray combo, if we purchase that, we put that on the DVD record.
yes,
And if we purchase just the Blu-ray, then we put that on just the Blu-ray.
yes.
And each title will only have 2 records.
Hopefully.
Ideally.
Ideally, that's the perfect world. And I've been trying, when somebody tells me that there's this, and the, what I came up with in the instructions here, down at the bottom, steps for cataloging a movie. Search for the item by scanning the UPC or searching for the title by title. Check when you find, if you find something in the system, check the ISBN, the UPC, the title, the GMD, the extent, and make sure that if you're adding a DVD, it should go on where the record where the 245H says video recording DVD or video recording DVD and DVD Blu-ray combo. If you're adding a Blu-ray DVD combo, it should go where the 245H says video recording Blu-ray or video recording DVD Blu-ray combo. If there are multiple records. So if you have this situation where there's a DVD record, there's a if you come across this situation where there's a separate record for each kind, let me know and I can combine them.
No.
It is wildly inconsistent. Some libraries want to leave them together because they do. I don't know why.
You can get it out faster, and that's why you.
Yeah.
One item is supposed to be two numbers.
That used to be the recommendations that we got, where we were separating, so we have more checkout power. More options.
But it
So
costs
say
the five
just-
times, right? That would be that.
Who doesn't
Right.
separate them?
Yeah, I prefer having all three of them separate because that's why we added the combo.
Is there a
because
rationale for you?
Category.
Mhm.
Space, time, and cataloging, and packaging.
We just repackaged the DVD and a DVD, we make a cover, DVD cover for the,
Yeah.
I get the Blu-ray alone records from OCLC. And
See, I don't know what the practice was before I got here, but I know that when I got here, there were a bunch of libraries that were putting the combos on with other things. And it was wildly inconsistent, like I said. It was really inconsistent. Most libraries were taking the combos and splitting them up, putting them in separate cases, calling one a DVD and one a Blu-ray, and it's okay to keep doing that. Yes. And then there were other libraries that were getting them and leaving them together and then putting them on one or the other inconsistently. And then there were other libraries that were getting them, splitting them apart and putting them both on the same record, which is why we have problems with a lot of things now. That
Well, I think a lot of times, I don't know if anybody else does this, but in the public thing, we always try to put DVD only or Blu-ray only.
Yes.
So that it does, people do see that, that there would be a distinct message on the record, when people pull it up.
But they don't have the ability to item a whole. But they can still see, so we don't have somebody coming to desk and going, well, I don't have a Blu-ray. Like, why didn't you reserve this one?
Small libraries. I do think there's also something happening on step number 1 of your handy dandy.
Yes.
And that is that I think sometimes catalogers are scanning the barcode, and if nothing comes up, they just hit add the item, and that's how duplicate records.
I'm sure that that's happening.
And so I'm wondering if you could add a step where you talk about like, hey, if your item didn't come up when you scan the barcode, here's where you can add that item's barcode to the record. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But in
Or type in
future,
the title. I mean, they can type in.
they can type in the title, but once you have like the title up, you can go into the marked record and add that barcode to it, so that the next person behind you that scans, they do come up with the item when they scan it.
Yeah.
But you have to know which field to write it in for that to happen. So if you added that to the instructions, that would be helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, I've changed number 1 to search by scanning UPC code. If it doesn't come up, then search by title.
Ideally, that's what everybody was already trained to do, because I've seen the handouts from before I got here, and they all say that. But you know what? It doesn't really seem to work that way.
I know.
And Osage City, Jeanette said that if you're worried about the artwork, you can get the artwork off the Midwest Tape website, create an account. You don't have to order but you can still get their artwork. So she just made that suggestion based on the conversation.
Okay. Well, and there's a question back here.
I may be playing devil's advocate here, but our customers be better served if maybe we had 2 item types for certain things like this scenario, so that when our customers did an advanced search, if we had something listed, a combo listed as both DVD and Blu-ray, when they did a search, an item level search, it would pull that up.
Well, right now, the first thing you see when you do an advanced search, that's actually the issue. I understand the issue now. I think I see what you're saying. So if we do,
Cataloging it, we listed in the catalog as both Blu-ray and DVD. We had 2 item types.
I guess, you know, right now there is, if a patron is doing an advanced search, they get that list of collection codes they can limit by. And under the collection codes, there is a collection code for Blu-ray DVD combo, and then there's one just for DVD somewhere over on the left, yeah. But I guess patrons don't see that in the left-hand column in this list.
Yeah, can we add that to that side?
The collection codes?
Yeah, because if you want to search for a movie, when you, on the left-hand side, you have to select movie or new movie, and you don't necessarily know which one it is, but if you could select DVD from that would be more helpful for the search.
I don't know if the collection codes can be added to those facets on the left. I'm not in.
Our customer goes to it, such DVD, and they don't realize the DVD Blu-ray combo records are separate, then it's not going to pull up those records.
Right.
Some way that
The DVD Blu-ray combos aren't separate. They're all in the same record.
but do they have some of them.
They have a different collection code, which you can.
They have a different collection code, but they don't have the same. They don't have the thing about creating a new item type is that all of the rules that govern circulation are related to item types. And so this is the same discussion that we've had before about a separate item type for TV shows as opposed to an item type for movies, is that if we create a separate item type for Blu-ray, then a patron, the item type limits, the checkout limits are based on the item type. So if you currently have rules set up at a library that says a patron can check out 5 movies, if you change that to 5, if you change the item type to DVD and have a separate item type for Blu-ray, then they'll be able to check out 5 Blu-rays and 5 DVDs. And that's the issue that we've had before when we've discussed this, is that then you end up with some of the smaller libraries that want to have those limits down low. All of a sudden, they've doubled their limits because of the different item types. So that's the big pitfall there. And if we had a separate item type for DVD, a separate item type for DVD Blu-ray combo pack, a separate item type for Blu-ray only, then we would also need a separate item type for local hold Blu-ray DVD combo pack, local hold or Blu-ray only. Walk-in, we need, essentially adding that one item type would mean adding 8 item types. And then somebody would bring up the whole idea of splitting the TV shows into a different record. Then we'd be talking about 9 more. So there's a lot of pitfalls there to that.
Just having bought a million Blu-ray DVD combos and split them all in the last 3 weeks, I love the new system. It makes it much easier to know what's supposed to go where. I like Doug Kirk is a great. I like that. So
Okay.
It's much easier.
Okay. Well, and like I said before too, is that, you know, if we eventually move to RDA, then the idea is all those things go, you know, that's one of the big issues with making there are a whole bunch of choices that were made when NECL started using Koha for NExpress that were made because it sounded like a good idea at the time. And now here it is like 10 years later, and it's like there's all these choices that were made that have these unintended consequences 10 years down the line, because a choice made then, as the software evolved and as the system evolved, there are things that were made, decisions that were made then to make things easier on everybody, that now trying to move into new features and to move into new types of new ways of working that are really hard to go back and fix those choices that were made then that are having a consequence on how things are going to be in the future. And so that's one of the concerns that I have, is if we make a choice now, we better make sure that we're going to be happy with it for a long time without having to go through every library and recatalog every item, which doesn't sound like any fun. So I'm not sure if we've exhausted this topic enough yet. So there's the handout there. You can read everything pretty much that we've talked about. I will, you know, we haven't, the policy committee hasn't met since the last meeting. I want to make sure that they meet, but I will also make sure, for those of you that are here, I want to meet twice before the next meeting. And then I also want to make sure that there's a BIB standards committee and that we've met at least once before the next meeting, which is in April 26th, I believe. It's on the agenda. And I don't think it's here. It's somewhere else. Is it in Pomona? It's in Seneca. I knew that. But it'd be fun to have a meeting in Pomona. What?
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I think it would be worth discussing briefly, not today, because this is a long conversation, but I think we should perhaps send to the policy committee a discussion of replacement prices and consistency. So like I pulled up Wonder Woman DVD that came out in September.
Oh.
Depending on which library you get it from, if you accidentally lose it, whatever, the replacement price could be $10. And the highest price is $31 for the exact same item. So I don't know what solution can come to this, if there is an easy solution, I don't know. But I wonder if we can't like set some sort of, after a certain amount of time, then the item price automatically goes down to this, or something like that, just to make it less, because the patron, again, does not get to choose which item that they want. So they can't choose the cheapest item to rent just in case. They're at the mercy of whichever library it happens to come from. So I'm thinking maybe we need to have a larger discussion about replacement prices.
Would it be easier if the library whose patron lost the item just bought the replacement themselves and charged them what they paid for the replacement and then sent the replacement on to the library? I don't know.
The problem with that is everybody does it differently, right? And maybe they wouldn't even want that item again. They wouldn't want it.
Yeah.
This is something, Maggie has talked to me about this a couple of times, and it is something that the policy committee needs to talk about because it has an effect on what policies might already be in place at libraries. So that's something that I'd like the policy committee to talk about.
For sure. I think it's a huge conversation that will take a long time to get some sort of consensus on, but I think it's a conversation we're having.
Okay.
Thank you.
The next thing that I had on here actually was, I meant to talk about that when we were talking about the last thing in that, we'll just leave it there because we're running out of time. PayPal. So we added PayPal in the spring of last year, and I've got the spreadsheets all worked out to make sure that the libraries where PayPal money has been collected get the money from 2017, and I came up with a process for how to run monthly reports on what's being collected through PayPal, and make sure that NECLS can do quarterly disbursements of the money that's collected. And then I was going to go through the documentation I had and add some screenshots last night. And I discovered that the reports that I wrote in December, which were getting data from Koha from November, no longer work because something changed in the upgrade. So these reports that I spent like 3 weeks writing in November, none of them work now. And I need to go back in and fix them. But I want to make sure everybody knows that I have a process ready to go. It's just that I don't have the reporting part of it worked out as consistently as I thought I did. Because all through December, it's like I'm looking at the November stuff. It's like, wow, this report's working great. It's brilliant. It's the most complicated report I've ever written. And then when I ran it yesterday, it's like, whoa, there's only 7 things on this. That can't be right. And then when I ran it after midnight last night from home, there was nothing on it because there's no data from January in the report because the tables, there's something in the tables that changed. And I can't run any of the reports, so I need to rewrite them. But everybody that had money collected in through PayPal on behalf of their libraries in 2017, I've got that all lined up to go to Lisa and to get everybody money. Mostly it's Leavenworth, because Leavenworth has really been promoting PayPal to their patrons. Overall, through the whole course of 2017, it was like $360 was collected via PayPal. Honestly, based on every time somebody pays with PayPal, I get an email. Based on like the last 3 days, I think we may have already collected over $200 in January because my email every 10 minutes the other day was just like, somebody paid, you've got this much in your PayPal account, you've got this much in your PayPal account. So once I do have the report fixed and once I am working on this, if you go to the homepage in Koha, here's the link. Right there, there's a tab that says PayPal reports. You can run the report and it won't work. But this is where monthly I'll run the spreadsheet and I will do it like I do the statistics, where the data will be collected in an Excel file, and then quarterly it'll be totaled up and you guys will get sent checks for whatever's collected minus the PayPal fees. So my notes under that part of my agenda are bogged down by craziness. So the last thing I've got on here, there is, how many of you know about the global thermal paper shortage? The receipt paper, the paper that there's a chemical, the thermal printers, the pages rely on their thermal properties from a chemical called leuco-dye, and the largest manufacturer in the world of leuco-dye is in China, and they were polluting so badly that the Chinese government said, that's too much. I mean, I don't know how bad of an environmental, I don't know how non-green you have to be for the Chinese government to say, whoa, rein it in. So the company that makes, the number one company in the world that makes the dye that makes this paper possible has been shut down since September. In September, a box of 50 rolls of receipt paper was about $45. Jesse was able to order 10 boxes at about $53 each last week to fill the demand that we have right now. And the projection is by the end of the year, what used to be like 80 cents a roll for paper could be like $1.75 to $2 a roll, and that it could get worse from there. The manufacturers of the paper are actually rationing how much paper they give to the distributors. So this is the normal receipt that comes out of the receipt printer. For a lot of you, this doesn't matter because you don't use the receipt printers. So congratulations, you don't have to worry about this problem. With a few changes, I can make them this big. With a few more changes, I can make them this big. So if you're worried about the cost of paper, this is something that can be done. But I also spent some time looking at it was on Atchison test, because you're at the top of the alphabet. So right now, I've talked about this. One of the system preferences, or one of the patron messaging preferences down here, one called item checkout, and there's this one called item check-in. So if a patron, if you select these two boxes here for a patron, and they have an email address in their account, they get an email saying you just checked out an item. And if you have that one checked, they get an email every time an item is checked in. And I have never done much to configure those, because everybody has said, well, why would you want an email every time you check something out or check something in? What I did is I did a lot of work to configure these so that instead of just being called item checkout and item check-in, I did a lot of modifications to these, and I renamed it to item library checkout receipt. And I reconfigured it so that it has pretty much the same data that you see on here, so that, you know, it could be like every time I go to Hy-Vee and buy something and I use my Fuel Saver card, I get an email telling me that I just bought a whole bunch of crap at Hy-Vee that I really don't need. That you bought, you know, a 12-pack of Coke and a bunch of donuts and yeah, Nutella Oreos. So I was going to work on this. Let me go. Yeah, it just comes in their email. Let me go to. I've only configured it for this library, for the Nichols library right now. Naturally, I've got too many things in here. Let's see. Oh, I'm not logged into. Logged into the wrong account. Yes, the most important thing, you know, if you want me to change anything about your receipts, all you have to do is ask. And now I'm not going to be able to log in here. It does come as an email, and the subject would be your library, your library name, digital receipt, and it essentially has all this same information. And what my plan is to go in.
Well, basically, if somebody has their email on their phone, they just have it.
Yeah, well, it would be a way, you know, when you're checking things out to a patron, you know, you get to that point where you can hit enter or click on, you know, print receipt. I'm planning on figuring out the code to change the text of these things, of these two things, that instead of saying item check-in or item checkout, it actually says digital checkout receipt or email checkout receipt. And then getting you guys some instructions, but I can make sure that, you know, if you want to try to cut back on the amount of paper you're using, we can make those two things more useful by making them actually look like the receipt that you would get as a piece of paper, so that.
Could that be on the drop down where it says print receipts?
I can't put it, I could put some, I'm not sure. It would be a great place for it, but I'm not sure I can put it there because to add it to the drop-down menu and not have it do anything, I'm not sure that would do anything. But the issue would be that the patron would have to have an email address in there. There's no way you could do this on the fly where, you know, you get to the end of that process and say, would you like this as a digital receipt? The email address has to be in there before you start checking the items out to the patron. So, but I think if there's good training to know that this is an option, and that's actually something useful that could be done with these item check-in and item check-out. And they do come as, they can be configured as text messages too. So if the patron is getting text messages, it's not a full-blown receipt. It just says you just checked out items at the library, because the text messages can only be 160 characters long. So it can't be a whole list of, you can't be the fall of the Roman Empire, Part 1, the Day of the Jackal, the Harry Potter.
That is working.
There you go.
She got it, you know,
Yeah.
like she would have.
So that's the last thing I had on the agenda, and I will, oh, actually Laura's raising her hand, so
I'm waiting now.
we can skip the transportation part.
I apologize, I had a migraine in the middle of the night before last, that I was hiding in the dark yesterday morning before I decided I could stand sunlight. So now that I'm all here, NExpress agreements don't have dollars involved, and we do need them before we can send out invoices. And I have a list here of the ones I don't have NExpress agreements. When I sent that original email out, I said I'd like them back by January 31st. But if you're on this list, I don't have it yet. And I have copies that you can just take with you for your next board meeting, and you sign it, and I know that you're got that in process. If you're not here and you're on this list, I'm going to be sending you an email. Okay, so I'm going to put that over on the table there. If you would look at this and take your copy if you're one of the libraries, and yes, you are on the list.
I know.
Just saying by the face. So, you know, we'll move right along, okay? That makes sense now that I'm all in the same day. Sorry.
Well, Mike did just point out that I left off transportation cost matrix. That's a low priority thing that we can skip until next time. So that should be it. I know, I'm keeping an eye on the clock.
I had one
We have sandwiches downstairs.